All right, man. It's been a long time since we've been able to sit down and even hang out.
No kidding.
I mean, we live close to each other. I feel like we should be hanging out more. But I moved out here to Texas to hang out with you, and you're too busy for me now.
Yeah, I get it. I know. It's rough.
It's good to see you, though.
Yeah, it's good to be here, man. Great setup. Love this.
It's new.
Yeah.
So
really dope.
You're technically, we did a podcast we just released one a few weeks ago, but this is technically the first official podcast of our new setup and our new direction. So
come on, man.
You're the first guest.
I'm honored.
History in the making.
I'm honored, man.
How long have we been friends? How long have we known each other now?
Okay, somebody just asked me this the other day.
Who asked you that?
It was actually Marcel.
Oh. prepping for today, I guess.
Yeah. I've known you all your life, only
Right.
because I'm a couple years older.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I've known you for what, 36 years? Are you
I'm
36?
I'm 33.
Oh, wow. Oh,
36.
my gosh. Yeah.
How dare you? This podcast is over.
My bad, bro. Just cut that out.
Dude, I have a vivid memory. I don't know if you're going to remember this. When we were kids, do you remember the old building on the highway?
In Inglewood?
Yeah, and then like they had the stage, and then behind the stage you'd go out to like the classrooms.
Yes. Awkward.
Yeah, weird.
Yes.
Do you remember? This is a different story, but do you remember the lady walked in when she was intoxicated?
Oh, I don't.
Oh man, that's.
But I feel like there's a lot of those stories.
Yeah, it was bad.
Awkward
It
ones.
was bad. She peed on one of the seats and she left. She just came in, did that, and then left the church.
I was just telling my kids that in one of our churches, because it was small, the restroom was literally like in the sanctuary. And when I would get like disciplined, the whole church would hear me getting disciplined and getting spanked.
That's what happens
in
here,
the middle of the messages. So
you got in trouble that much?
yeah, yeah.
Wait, was that with my grandparents?
That was probably right when your dad came in and took over.
Man.
Yeah, because he remembers it. He remembers preaching and me getting whooped at the same time. So
We need mothers like that again.
yes, definitely. Don't be afraid.
We have too many moms who let their kids mess around in church.
Oh,
dude.
and I think that's how this conversation started. Yeah, we were raised differently, man.
It was definitely a different time. I actually, on one of our Facebook reviews for our church, it's somebody complaining, saying, my kid was crying and they told me to leave the sanctuary. I'm never coming back to the church again.
People don't get it.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, people don't get it.
I think people live in their own world, you know?
Yeah, and then it's and it goes to like the thought of when people show up to church, they think it's about them. Mm-hmm. And it's like,
Yep.
I literally told my church this Sunday, I'm not here for you.
Right.
I'm here for the Lord.
Right. There's so much freedom in that mindset though.
Oh, for
There's so
sure.
much, but I think like these, not to just, rag on moms with babies, but I think there is this mindset, people come into the church and it's just like, oh, you're this is for me. Like you're building all this for me.
Yep.
What I can't make noise in here. My child can't cry in here. Yep. It's very frustrating. But anyway, this story, you told me, you sat with me, you said, I was probably like 3 or 4, I don't know. You go, hey, you could punch me in my face as hard as you want. And I said, really? You go, yeah. You were on your knees and you're looking at me in my eyes and you're like,
I think I remember.
Do you remember this?
Oh, man.
You could punch me as hard as you want. I said, really? And I go and I'm like, and I look around, I go to my mom. I said, Mom, Angel said I could punch him as hard as I can. Can I do it? She goes, don't punch him. Leave him alone.
Remember when your mom needed advice on how to train your hair?
I do remember. It didn't work. The advice you gave her did not work, by the way.
She's like, it's not working. Their hair is too stubborn. It was 3 flowers and a beanie at night, so you're welcome.
If I do remember that. I remember that a couple times. I feel like Diga did it more than me.
Yeah.
But I do remember that.
Oh,
That's
if
so
only
funny,
we had
dude.
access to photos from those days.
I know, dude. I think I have a couple of photos back in the day from you. Like, I have a video of you like preaching a sermon or teaching. Like, I think I sent it to you.
I was 12 years old.
Dude, that's crazy.
My first, we kind of did like the youth takeover on a Friday night. And Pastor Eddie was our youth pastor. And so he's like, hey, man, I want you to preach. I'm like, what? And I just remember going up there and just like reading a script, man. But
that was cool. I mean,
yeah, it was
I think
rough.
even that, like, it's so different. Church was so different back then. Like, I was talking to my dad about this. Like, back then we let people do things that we probably would never do today, right? And I don't know if that's good or bad. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if that's a positive, because it could be that church has become more of like a production
Sure.
rather than like a community.
Yeah.
And maybe we need to go back to a little more unprofessional.
Yeah, no, that's a great thought. I think it's like we're afraid of what might happen
Yes.
in the middle of a service. We're afraid that 10 years later there's going to be a podcast and them talking about that service.
Dude.
we just talked about that drama we did where they came in and acted like they were taking over the church. Where they broke in on the side door.
It was Lenny.
And one of the ladies took her wedding ring off and put it in her mouth because she thought we were really getting robbed.
Yeah. Imagine doing that in Texas when everybody's on their guns.
Oh, there's no way.
Bad idea.
That's a bad
We thought that
drama.
was a really good idea, though.
Yeah, and you know what? Man, they gave us the freedom to do those things, man, and maybe they shouldn't have.
This one time at my old church. I don't know if we'll leave this in, but my pastor let some guy sing for offering. This guy would visit. He was a good friend of our pastor. But he wasn't like a preacher. He gets up and he gets to the stage and he grabs a microphone and he starts singing, "I believe I can fly," to the whole congregation.
No.
Yes. He's missing teeth.
Oh,
And
man.
he's up there singing. And Omar's playing guitar with him.
Oh, man.
And he literally looks at Omar. He goes, "I'll do this a cappella."
Oh,
And he keeps
yes,
singing. And
yes.
luckily, that was probably a few months before we started filming all of our services.
Oh, man.
I mean, lucky for him. I wish we would have that
Oh,
footage.
for sure.
There's so many things that we look back on and just like, I will ask my pastor, like, why did you let that guy do that? It's crazy.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I love those stories.
But we've been in church together since we were kids, right? So we grew up, I was obviously born to the church. My dad was pastoring. You were there with your family.
Mm-hmm.
And then we went into the merging and all that. And then you took over the youth ministry,
Yeah.
right? So we've been, and then when I think you took over after Mondo. And so I was already in the youth when Mondo was doing it. So I basically was there when you took over the youth. And then we just have tons of years of ministry together.
Yep.
Tons of memories. I was there for pretty much all your kids being born.
Yeah,
Right.
you were like at the hospital.
Yeah. The only one I wasn't there for was Kayla.
Really?
Yeah.
And you ended up being her Nino.
I know.
How'd that work out?
I don't know. It's too early in the morning.
You were
dude.
next on the list, bro. Who's next? Mike
Hey,
and
listen.
John.
Yeah. You know what? I'm privileged to be that, though.
And you know what? She still calls you guys
She
Ninos.
does.
So
And we still...
you guys are good Ninos.
Yeah,
I'm just saying.
we buy her as much as we can.
Yeah.
Take care of her.
Yeah.
Take her out
that's
to
great.
eat. Although...
Harass her boyfriends.
I don't want to talk about that on the podcast. That guy. Anyway, okay. So we've been in ministry for a long time. We have a lot of memories. What was it like leading a youth ministry, being young? Because you were pretty young when you took it over.
Oh, yeah. I mean, when Mondo was there, I was already like 17, 18. So there was already kind of that expectation of helping and being a part of it and being kind of a youth leader,
Right.
being somewhat of a mentor to really a lot of like guys like your age that were just a little bit younger. And so when Des and I got married at 18, I remember Pastor Omar asking us, like, "Hey, we'd love for you guys to stick around and help with the youth." And Des was just like, "No way." She was like,
That's
"No
like a
way."
pattern, though.
Yeah, she's pretty much said no way to everything, But
funny.
we kind of stuck it out there and just assisted and just helped. And then as kind of Mondo and Lisa transitioned more into kind of an assistant pastor role, that's when we were asked to kind of take over the youth. We're only 20 years old.
Was there ever, like, when Pastor Omar said, we want you to wait around, did you have an expectation of like, okay, we'll probably take this over? Or were you just there just because you wanted to help?
I think we were there definitely just because we wanted to help.
Right.
But I think you can kind of see somewhat of a pattern starting to form where the youth ministry was really a great place for guys to get kind of developed and practice those pastoral skills and work with people. And so for me, I was just like, man, I love being here. I felt young at heart still, so I love being around young people.
Yeah.
And so obviously the thought was like maybe one day we could take over being, the youth leaders here. If Mondo and Lisa kind of ever went out to start a church or something like that. So that was definitely kind of there, and almost felt like we were kind of even in training to eventually maybe take over. So yeah, there was some of that.
I think that was probably some of the funnest years, the best years of not just like ministry development and maturity, but like just being around, because all of our youth is pretty much pastoring, evangelists, doing some sort of ministry. We're all still, most of us are really close still. Like we were at conference and I was talking to one of the guys we've known for years, you as well. And he's just like, man, he's like, this is crazy because everybody we grew up with, they're not just here. They're building the conference, they're serving in the conference, they're preaching at the conferences. Like, and I feel like that's so rare. And I think obviously your leadership, your discipleship, Pastor Omar, my dad, Pastor Eddie, like you guys have such a heavy, a heavy part in what that looks like. And that discipleship, it was very different. The discipleship was very different back then than it is now. It was so much more relational as opposed to like, hey, come to this class. And
And I think that's what makes what we have so special, right? Like even taking some people here from Texas out there, like without having to really explain it, they can see like, oh, you guys have this rich history together. And then I start sharing the stories of like, oh, like that young couple, they used to be in my youth ministry, and I was there when they got saved, or I was there when they got married, and watching that. And I think coming back years later, I mean, it's been now 20 years since we first took over that youth ministry.
Jeez.
So you think about the longevity of a lot of these relationships and the joy of still having this connection with one another.
Right.
I think it really is there's a uniqueness to that. And it's something I think we all kind of really value. And it makes kind of who we are and keeps our relationships.
But I think there's always been like, you got to fight for that though.
Oh, for sure.
Right? Because even like you and I, we've had our moments of like disagreement and, contention and a little bit of, and we've had to be very honest with each other about our friendship and our relationship, even out here pastoring churches together. Right? There's it's almost like there's a natural in every man that leads, there's a natural desire to compete.
For
right?
Sure.
And there's like a natural desire to be better and to, grow faster. And I think you and I had to like really, I know for sure, we've talked about this and I've talked about it on the channel.
For
like
sure.
I've had to really come to grips with like, dude, you can't let this be the priority. You can't let this be what you do. And we've had these conversations where we've had to like, man, we don't want to lose what we have.
Exactly.
Right? Like,
yeah, it's something that you have to fight for, right? And one of the saddest things is where you see lifelong like friendships like broken apart for either misunderstandings or lack of communication, or even different desires and pursuits. And I think even for us, even with our relationship, other pastors kind of in our network that you've had some conflict with, like at the end of the day, that conflict's either going to develop and make your relationship stronger, or it can impact it in a negative way. And I think we choose to say, no, I value this relationship. I'm not going to allow this this moment or season of conflict or disagreement break apart the years of relationship that we have. And it's like your sibling, right? Like you have moments with your siblings where you're like, man, no, I don't want to go over there. Or you're not seeing eye to eye on things. But at the end of the day, it's like, no, that's my brother.
Right.
And I'm not going to allow this little petty thing. I'm not going to allow my own ego, my own, feelings get in the way of this relationship that we've had for so many
Right.
years, because I want lifelong relationships, right? Like
Yes.
I want to be in our 60s and we're vacationing togeting in the Bahamas, right?
Let's make it 50s. How about that?
50s
It's a little bit earlier.
or 40s, right? And
Yeah.
I long for those relationships, but they're worth. There's got to be humility, right? Like humbleness, and just you got to fight for those things.
I feel like what I've realized in that contention is 80% of the problem is within me.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? Like there's, and we've had conversations where we're kind of arguing a little bit,
Sure.
and some of those arguments are assumptions that we've made about each other, right? And it's like, and I think one of the worst things that you can do in friendship is not communicate.
Correct.
Right? Because then you sit back and you out of your own ego, your own insecurity.
And then especially if you're like an overthinker.
Which
like,
I am.
I am too.
Right, yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
And like if I'm an overthinker, I'm gonna overthink negatively all the time.
Yes, 100%.
Like I default to thinking negatively about every
Yeah,
situation.
I bet you he's saying this.
Yeah,
I bet
exactly.
you they think this. Yeah,
Exactly.
Yep.
And then it's like, no, I'm gonna overthink positively about
good.
my relationship.
That's great.
I am. But I think you're right. I think it's some of those just misconceptions that you have that about yourself or about how other people perceive you.
Yeah.
That could just impact you in a negative way. And I think they're just not helpful.
I agree. I think that it's an internal battle that.
Yeah.
But I as we've talked, like I feel like it's God using that. Iron sharpens iron, right?
Yeah.
It's God revealing things within you that's like, dude, there's nothing wrong with him. There's a lot wrong with you.
Oh man.
Right? Like there's a lot in your own your own ego, your own pride that's like, oh, okay, God, I need to get this in check.
Yep.
Because at the end of the day, and I think a lot of people forget this in ministry, we're building kingdom together.
Correct.
You know what I mean? So like
Correct.
your success is
Yep.
my success.
Absolutely.
And there is not one pastor who could stand on top of the work of the church and say he did the work.
Exactly.
Because it's God.
Right.
Right? Obviously we have to work, we put in the time, we put in the effort and all that. But at the end of the day, nobody takes glory for God.
Right.
Right?
For sure.
And so I think it's battling that within yourself. But we've been doing this for years.
Yeah, man.
And I think I remember in the youth, I showed up late to a Bible study. Do you remember this?
On a Sunday morning.
You were my youth leader.
Oh, gosh.
And I was a leader in the youth. And I showed up late.
Oh man. And I'm realizing how harsh I was.
But you know what? So I remember this. I think this was like our first argument, as friends and in leadership in like ministry. And I walked into the room and you had everybody clap for me. And I was mad. I was so mad. I was embarrassed. I was like,
man.
this guy.
I'm sorry, bro.
No. It was good for me. It was good for me. I needed that, right? The truth was, honestly, I had a lot of pride to deal with. And you were like the perfect leader at the time.
Yeah.
Because I needed somebody to clap for me when I'm late. You know what I mean? Like, bro, get it together. And I remember we argued in the back of the sanctuary, and I was like, I can't believe you did that. You should have never done that. How dare you? And you said you should have been on time.
Oh man, you know, you look back at some of those, like, especially for myself, I'm like, oh, they're cringing moments sometimes.
Yeah.
Of like arguments that were like pointless or like things that I did, you know, and I think back about just kind of my development
Right.
over the years. But yeah, that's probably one of the not so proud moments.
Well, it's a great memory. But again, those things are so petty.
For sure.
And they're so little. Like it doesn't matter. It doesn't make a difference. But so how's ministry now? What are you up to now?
Man, I mean, it's full steam ahead right now. You know, we're kind of stepping into our 8th year of planting Reclaim Church here in Texas, and it's flown by. Like 2 days ago marked 9 years that we moved here.
Wow.
To Texas, to Austin, Texas, and so it's just flown by so much. But then you stop to unpack, like, oh, so much has happened in those years, and so. Man, we're excited about this new kind of season we're stepping into with our church, and we're seeing, it's been a great role. It feels like we've had this is like part 2 of Reclaim Church,
right?
Because I think for COVID was really like a revamp, an opportunity to revamp, almost relaunch.
What was like the biggest difference? What is the biggest change that you went from before pre-COVID to post-COVID?
Well, I think pre-COVID, we were in the season of still trying to get those gears going for our church.
Right.
And like a lot of emphasis on me, my wife, our small few people that had been there for a couple years, really doing everything and doing the majority, like 90% of the work was done by like a small hand group of people.
Right.
And so I think that within itself was exhausting, tiresome. We really didn't have the systems in place to help us get to another. Like we grew quickly, but we didn't have the systems in place to really sustain us.
Right.
And so we kind of maxed out, and you're kind of maxing out. And so when COVID hit, it kind of forced us to kind of say, okay, how are we going to redo this again? And now that we've got a couple people that are here that are with us, that are committed, let's take the time to kind of, because we have it, we've got nothing but time.
Right.
Let's take the time to kind of rebuild this in a way that's going to sustain us and take us further than where we've been. And that's really what we did. We took the time, even our conversations, I think, with you, right? And just kind of helping us think about some systems and think about, hey, man, like you came with more fresh eyes. So your perspective on even how we did ministry, how we were even launching the church, really impacted us to say, okay, man, we need to have a better team in place. Let's get more people on board, and let's delegate a little bit better, and let's build back better. And we've seen the fruit of that over the last, 4 years now.
Jeez.
Has been night and day from the first 4 years, first 4 or 5 years.
Do you feel like you had to like replant?
It felt like it. It felt like that. It felt like we have a team that's our faithful core that stuck around, right? While everyone kind of, again, did their thing during COVID. Coming back was like, okay, this team is kind of doing everything, and then you get back into the recruiting, you're building your teams again.
Right.
Getting the church kind of rolling again, getting your systems in place. And so, it was just kind of night and day difference from the first time we did it.
I think that probably like 70% of the church that was with us before COVID is not a part of the church anymore.
Yeah.
You got like a whole new group, but you planted twice, right? So you did, well, I guess we could say 3 times, right? Post-COVID, pre-COVID, and in San Pedro.
Yep.
And so you've been able to be a part of work from the beginning, or from the beginning twice, but also revamping. And I think obviously this has been like this is where you're going to be, right? Reclaim in Texas, this is where you're at. And then you just got the building and all that.
Yeah, I mean, God willing,
Right.
I mean, I've always left a small crack open for God to come in and just say, hey, we've got another location. But I really do feel this is where God has us, for the foreseeable future, and kind of what he's put on our hearts at Reclaim Church to build. I think we're definitely just have our head down and just grinding and building what the Lord's kind of put on our heart.
And how's the family? What's going on with your family?
Man,
you got a lot of movement right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's a kind of a transition taking place in our family, with my son Miles getting married and Jordan, off to college. And so we quickly just went from a family of 6 to a family of 4.
Oh my gosh.
And then, Kyla's a senior, so she plans on maybe going to school. And so, bro, I might have only 1 kid at the house this time next year. So, I mean, it sounds great, though. I kind of like that. We're 2 kids rich right now. So I'm just saying, we're getting name brand snacks and man, groceries look nice at the house right now.
Kyla and Brookie reaping all the blessing, bro.
For sure.
Reaping all the blessing, man.
Oh, for sure. So it's good, though. But, and then, Miles is still around, so we get to hang out with him and his lovely wife, Allie.
That's so cool.
It's definitely a different season for us. One I never imagined we kind of step into, but it's a lot of fun. I got to golf a little bit more. So
is it weird that, I mean, obviously our kids are much younger than yours, but I've always felt like they're getting older, but I feel the same. Like I don't feel like I'm getting older.
Nope.
You know what I mean? Would you agree that you feel the same?
Like I'm going to be 40 next year, and I'm like, 40's not that old. I used to imagine 40 being like old, but now I'm like, nah, it's not that old. But I don't know if that's just me.
I was gonna say all the young people are probably saying, "Dang, 40 is pretty old."
I'm imagining that.
40 is
But
old.
I feel
But
good.
you've done a lot. I mean, you've accomplished a lot in life. Like that to see Miles getting married was, because we got to be at the wedding, was like it was surreal.
Right.
You know, because I feel like your family is the first family that we've been able to be a part of kind of the journey. My wife and I, like, obviously I used to babysit your kids when they're babies, and you know, I've known Miles since before he was born.
Yeah.
You know? And so to see him grow, it's been a very surreal experience, even with Kyla. You know, looking at our relationship with her, and like, obviously she's getting older, but I love that she still calls us. I love that she lets us take her out to dinners and stuff like that.
Yep.
I do value that time with her. Yeah. But it is definitely surreal. And I think Miles getting married is very similar to you, right? You got married very young.
Yeah, I mean, which was kind of shocking. We didn't really see that for like our kids, because, like, to be honest, like, they never really wanted what Des and I had. Like, they would tell us as they were kind of in their teenage years, like, "Oh, we don't want what you guys have." Like,
What was their reasoning for that?
they just didn't want to, like, settle down. They didn't want to have families young. And I think a lot of it is like culture today, right? Like, it's just not, the traditional family is not a optimal kind of choice in culture. And so we've seen that kind of progression with at least our older ones. Like, they didn't want to get married young. They didn't want to have kids young. You know, so for him, it was a little bit shocking that he got married young.
What was weird is I feel like he never had a girlfriend, and then he gets a girlfriend, gets married, right? Which is,
yeah. And for a while there, we kind of questioned, like, "Hey, man,
right,
like,
man?
we haven't seen you talking to no girls. Like, are we good?
Yeah.
Like, you know, you're all right? A little sus." You know?
poor Miles. That joke is fine now that he's married.
Yes.
But back in the day, poor guy.
No, it wasn't, right? And all it took was one. All
Yeah.
it took was, you know, him meeting kind of the right one. I think internally, I think he knew what he wanted.
Right.
And so he was very select. Now, in hindsight, he was just selective.
Right.
He was
good.
selective. Yeah. Right. Like, he was selective. And when he found the right one who loved God, he was like, "This is what I want."
So you got married really young, but you also had kids like right away. How old were you when Miles was born?
20.
That's very young.
Yes. So we got married at 18. And then Miles came at 20. And then we had back to back to back.
So Miles is how old now? He's how old now?
He's 19.
And then
Jordan's 18. Kyla's 17. And Brooklyn's going to be 15 on the 10th, September 10th.
Okay. That's funny. That's like our kids. Liam's 9. Radlin's going to be 8. Lucas just turned 6. And Emery's 3.
Bro,
Love it.
it's rough.
It is.
It gets rougher. Just so you know.
I don't want to hear. Well, you had 3 daughters. I only got 2.
Very true.
So I'm hoping that, you know,
Very
balances
true.
out a little bit.
Very true.
You know, I can't imagine 3 daughters. But I wanted to discuss this article concerning parenting young and getting married young. It says the proportion of adults in the United States younger than 50 years old who do not have children is growing, going from 37% in 2018 to 47% in 2023. This is according to a new Pew Research Center survey. There's another article that's I'll read real quick. It says Pew's study examined 2 groups of U.S. adults: Americans ages 18 to 49 who say they're unlikely to have children, and those 50 and older who do not have children. The survey, which polled more than 3,000 people, included both child-free Americans who chose not to have children and childless adults who are not parents due to the circumstances out of their own control. And so I kind of looked into this article a little bit, and their focus really was, the reason they didn't want to have kids is, now we're not discussing those who can't have children.
Sure.
Right? We understand that there's those circumstances, and we don't want this to be about them, because you want to pray for those people. You hope that God provides what they're believing for. But I'm more shocked that there are people that simply just don't want kids. Right? Young people, even older people now, that they just don't want to have kids. They want to live their own life. The reasons are focus on career.
Yep.
Kids cost too much money. They want personal freedom, and then there's the fear of the unknown. There's even this new trend called dinks.
Wow.
Dinks, yeah, I looked it up. I looked into it a little bit. It's double income, no kids. And it's very weird. Yeah, it's
Wow.
So it's basically this idea that, so yeah, their idea is they just want to be free. They don't want any responsibility.
Gosh.
What are your thoughts about
Yeah.
this?
Well, one, I don't think it's their fault, because I think it's an ideology today that's kind of coming at them from all angles. I think the real thing is that there's this kind of assault on traditional marriage, right, and the traditional family, and you're seeing it from kind of a few different sides. You've got like the feminist movement that comes in and is promoting, hey, be career driven, be your own boss, build your own wealth, right? Not necessarily wrong, but the outcomes of that are don't have a family, don't have kids, wait until you're in, maybe your 30s to build a family. But for some women, that's kind of risking it to have kids, right? Like there's kind of a clock that's there for them. And then on the other end, for a lot of men, there's this kind of ideology that's out there. I don't know if you're familiar with like the whole red pill manosphere kind of
Explain
community.
just a little bit about it. What is that?
Yeah, and so it kind of promotes up front like masculinity, promotes like self-care, financial freedom, right? Like men should be leaders and protectors and providers. So it sounds good.
Sounds good. Yeah, it does sound good.
But on the kind of the back end of it, what you start to kind of see from that is you start to see like misogyny come from that, right? They start to objectify women. They kind of reduce women down to labels. And so then it becomes problematic. Then it becomes, have multiple partners, spend your 20s, experimenting, having fun, building your body count, right? Like all those things, having multiple sexual partners. And so that right now is like very rampant in culture. And so it's no wonder why the birth rate is declining. I think you're right. I seen it the other day where it's like at its lowest right now, the birth rate. Wow. It was like out of 1,000 women, like 50 of them from like 15 to 40 have children. And so it's at an all-time low. But I think it's that. I think it comes back to what culture is promoting as success, what culture is promoting as, the pursuit of happiness. And so we're starting to see the results of that. And so, even with my own kids, I've had to have a lot of conversations with them. And that's kind of how I've been in this kind of world a little bit because of my conversations with them. Because I'm like, where did you hear that from?
Yeah.
Right? Like one of my daughters, when she was in high school, I remember her vividly telling us, like, I don't want to get married. I want to have kids, but I don't want to get married. I want to have a career. I want to do my own thing.
Wow.
And almost like talking down on like my wife and I, like in front of us, like almost saying like, I don't want what you did or what you have, okay?
Yeah.
I don't want to get married young. I don't want to have kids young, almost as if it was like this great big burden. And we were like, okay, that's odd, right? And I think she kind of got that from like Gilmore Girls or something, right? Like single,
demonic.
Single mom raising children. And my wife's like, well, your dad is not going to be the father figure to your kids.
Right.
And then, you kind of start to see that ideology kind of creeping in. And I think that's why it's so important for like, even for our homes and how we raise our children, to really kind of have those conversations and really be intentional with teaching them biblical principles on getting married, on raising a family.
Well, even like the biblical principle, the biblical setup, foundation of a family is so counterculture, right? Wives submit to your husbands. Like that alone is like, well, how dare you? We don't submit to anybody. It's just like, but it's this weird thing. And I think a lot of it comes from the idea that men aren't really godly. right? And so it's like, well, why would I submit to somebody who's not godly? You find that the most healthy relationships are the ones where each person is operating in their role with humility and selflessness, right? Like love has to be the foundation of the relationship. And what we're seeing today, I feel like, is this exactly what the scripture says is like, they'll be lovers of self. And I think that's why we're seeing the cutoff of families being built, marriages, children. I think it is because people are lovers of self. They don't want to have children. They don't want to get married because it interferes with their own like comfort, their own peace, their own. I want to travel. I want to do this. I want to do that. And,
kids are an inconvenience.
Exactly. And I feel like that's even in the church. Like, I have conversations with people. They don't want to have kids. They want to wait till they're older. And I'm just like, a part of me is like, well, I don't want to tell you to do anything you don't want to do.
Sure.
But the other part of me is like, I feel like having kids young is good.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I had Liam when I was 24. We were married for 2 years. Had Liam, and then obviously had our kids back to back. You had Miles when you were 20. Even younger. And do you see any like negative part of that?
Well, I here's what I go back to. I think it's the negative part is that people are refusing to work on themselves earlier.
That's a great point.
And so there are some people that don't need to be parents right now.
Agreed. Yes.
But it's because they want to go out, have fun. They want to go out and try things. They want to go out and spend their late teen years, their 20s, just going wild, right? And so, and then what happens is why they're not having multiple kids young, why they're not getting married young, is because they're kind of putting that on the back burner. Whereas the solution to me is start working on yourself younger, and you'll start to see younger families. You'll start to see marriages. Like I think for us, like in our circles, we're kind of an anomaly because we have seen a lot of young people get married, have kids, and be successful, right? In their churches, be successful in society overall. But I think that comes back to because they started working on themselves at a younger age, right? We go back to like the youth ministry, right? How many of those became pastors, became leaders, right? Got married, had kids. It's because their walk with God was something very serious to them when they were 16, 17 years old.
Right.
And so I wouldn't recommend everybody getting married at 18, at 20, right? But if you start working on yourself earlier, you start developing, your spiritual walk with the Lord and maturity there, disciplines, start developing some good habits and setting yourself up well to get married young, have kids young. Man, I think there's such a benefit to that. The problem today is that I see, even in the church, right, is that young people want to, again, have fun and then settle down later on and then get married, then have kids.
Do you think that is a symptom of immaturity, laziness, or selfishness? Right?
All of it.
All of it, I guess. Yeah.
All of it.
Because it seems like even when I was young, I knew I want to get married young. I want to have a family young. I want to pastor a church. So I built my whole life on this, I guess, this pursuit of, we could say, adventure. Right. This pursuit of something that was attainable but was going to be difficult. And I feel like our world has pretty much set up an environment where life is easy. It's not going to be hard. You're going to just have fun, be comfortable, do what you want. And I that's so counter scripture, right? Like if anything, if you look at even like the pursuit of Jesus, like his whole thing was selflessness. And I think as especially men, like I feel like for the young men that are watching this, that are doing these things, like we can't be selfish.
Right.
And I think that's kind of like the whole base of it. It's just like even like the Dinks, right? Like I love that name, by the way. That's funny. It's like pure selfishness. Like I don't want a kid because then I have to stop doing what I want to do. Instead of it's a privilege to have children, I get to raise the next generation. And I think it comes from this really selfish mindset that is just it is our world. That is where we are.
It is. It is that pursuit of self. It is that pursuit of what I want, what pleases me, what I desire. And you know what? Having kids, right, is a selfless job, right? And so I think people want to avoid that. They want to stay away from that. And they live for self, but I think they are missing out on one of the greatest gifts that God has for us in having children, in raising them, and watching them grow up to love the Lord, to get married, to accomplish some of their goals. Those are some of the greatest like joys that I've have experienced in my own life.
So you're now seeing the fruit of the seeds you planted for, years.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, now it's like, you're in the grind of it, trying to raise these kids. And then now you're like, okay, now you go out and live and be the person that you saw us try to be. And it's a great feeling to see them really gravitate to the values and the principles that you tried so hard to instill to them as they were growing up, right? Like, because at first they didn't, right? It's kind of that saying, like, children will idolize you. They'll go through these phases. They'll idolize you, they'll demonize you, and then they'll humanize you, right? And it's like, while they're going through that, you don't know anything. They demonize you, right? Everything that you try to do for them, they don't appreciate anything.
Right.
They question everything. Those are some tough years because you start to question, man, like, are they going to grasp the biblical principles and the values that I'm trying to instill into them? And because in some of those years, you feel like they're not going to gravitate to them, or they're going to have to go through their own very difficult life lessons and then maybe come back. And some do. But it's a blessing when you start to see them adopt those principles and values for themselves and for their own life. And there's a beauty in that, man. But it's work, man. It's a lot of work.
I think that's like the underlying to all this, right? Is your pursuit of something greater is going to take a lot of work, right? Like, even Jess and I, I think we're going on 12 years, maybe 2012. Yeah, 12 years. And it's a lot of work. Having kids is a ton of work. Like, being married is a ton of work. And I think I almost feel like when I'm talking to young people, it's like, man, get better, because this is a good life.
Yep.
Like, I'm so fulfilled. Right, I don't regret one day where there's never a day where I'm like, man, I should have waited another 10 years to have kids.
Right, no.
Like, I don't regret it at all. There's not one part of it. It's like, if anything, I love being young with my wife and our kids, and we're like growing together, we're learning together, we're maturing together, and I think it's like this is life. Like, this is what life is supposed to be. I think this is what God has created. Right, He's called us to build families, to lead families, and I think a lot of people are missing out. But listen, I want to get to some Q&A, some questions that we have. Great conversation. I feel like we need a part 2 of this sometime.
Let's do it.
There's so many things that we couldn't even get to, so many avenues that, as we're talking, I'm like, dude, we can go down that, we can talk about this. But all right, so let me get some good ones. What do you say to somebody who wants to have kids but they feel like they're not ready financially?
Yeah, that's a good one, because I think you should. Especially, again, it goes back to when you're young, right? Set yourself up in a way to have a family, to get married, to establish your family and your life. I think those are important things to do. I think there's nothing wrong with that, right? But I think if you're married and you have a desire to have children, and maybe financially you feel like, man, we're just not fully there yet. I don't know if you'll ever fully be there. You might be pursuing something that really is unattainable. But I would say, man, have kids, man. Don't wait,
I feel like God provides, right?
Like, I feel like God, and I think it's, people are afraid to go through difficulty and hardship. Like, it's going to be tough. Right. You might not feel like you have all of the resources you need for that child. But let me tell you, they'll be okay, right? You don't need the latest $1,200 stroller, right? You don't need to afford those things and then have kids, right? Like I'm saying, like, don't let that be the thing that holds you back from having kids.
That's great.
Like God will provide.
Do you think, here's another one, do you think that having kids will affect your schedule, your life, like your routines? And how does it? How do you control that?
Yeah, absolutely it will. Like kids will come in and and disrupt your whole life. But you learn to adapt. You learn to value implementing them into your life, and you make adjustments. You know, even raising kids, like there are things that you have to say no to say yes to being a part of, you know, their practices and their schedules, and there's definitely sacrifices you have to make. And that's why now I get a golf more that they're leaving, right? Like
you paid the price.
My hobbies took a back burner to my kids.
Now they're doing good. So here's another one. How do you find balance? And this will be the last one. How do you find balance between family and ministry?
You don't. I'd say this often, is that there's no such thing of like real balancing family and ministry. Really, it's learning how to lean into family or ministry in different seasons. And for us, we've learned time management is so critical, especially when you're the pastor of a church, when your kids, all four of them play sports, they're all in school. Time management, learning how to, fluctuate and pivot, between schedules is so important. And then what we've tried to do is we've tried not to compartmentalize family and ministry. For us in our home, ministry we did with family. Family, it was ministry. And so I hear a lot today, well, I don't have time with my family. I'm doing too much ministry. It's like, we do them both. We bring our kids along with us. Our kids planted the church with us. It wasn't like, okay, mommy and daddy are doing this and you guys are just here. No, they came along the ride with us. They're church planters as well. Right. And so over the years, we've had to learn, like, no, we're doing ministry as a family, right? And so, times that we spent together building God's kingdom. And so it made it easier for us to manage both of them. And so for us, that's kind of how we've operated over the last 19 years. Yeah,
great answer, dude. Love it. Love the conversation. Love what God's doing in your life, in your church, and the family.
Appreciate it, man.
I'm going to do more podcasts with you just so we can hang out. This is what it takes.
I love it. There's nobody's recording. We're just hanging out. I love it. This is
what it takes, man. I had a great time with you today. Appreciate you for coming on. Thank you so much, man.
Appreciate you, man. Proud of you, man.
Hey guys, thank you so much for watching. Listen, if you love this kind of content, make sure you like the video, comment your opinions, comment your questions, comment your thoughts below, and subscribe to the channel. We'll be releasing podcasts just like this as often as we possibly can. Thank you guys for watching. We'll see you next time.